Hi, and welcome to Mindshifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm your co-host, Jeanie Ryce, along with Dr. Tim Hayes, and we welcome you to the show. Today is Tuesday, December the 1st, 2015. Wow, November went by quick. Welcome to December, and we have a special show going on this week. But first, let's welcome Michael.
Well, thank you, dear heart. And thank you, everyone who chooses to join us every day that you choose to join us. We are honored, and the fact that you lend a listening ear means this energy goes further and further afield every time you listen. And our purpose in doing this show is to provide a space of support for people to understand the first century Aramaic forgiveness process in particular, and how that fits into the dynamic of shifting life out of sadness, rage, fear, pain, trauma into living as we're designed to live as true human beings. And our definition of a human being is very simple, and that is hold a newborn child. You know what a human life is. That awesome, sweet presence of love is where we're each designed to live, and where, if we choose to engage in forgiveness, we can be living. Forgiveness being the removal of whatever belonged, so that the restoration of what is designed to be running our lives is possible. So once again, welcome. Delighted that you're here. And we started the week off yesterday with some history with Gail and David and Dr. Tim. I'll share a little bit coming from the AA perspective. And our purpose in covering this conversation is we've, of course, along the way, run into and worked with a lot of people who've been in the AA tradition and who've gotten to a space where they live a clean and sober life. And so that being said, with thousands of people having been impacted by the AA traditions, the hope here is that the contribution that first century Aramaic forgiveness can make to those who are involved in those traditions, or those who, especially with family time coming up, might be facing some family dynamics and internal dynamics that they're not sure how to deal with. We want to be of support in helping to shift those dynamics from sadly, the rampant pain of the world, and bring us back to the state of true beingness, back to the state of love, and provide the tools and the support for doing that. So we're honored that you're here with us. And Gail, are you there, young lady?
I am here.
Well, good. Awesome. Well, we enjoyed your input yesterday. It was good to learn a little more of the history of the AA program and where it's been. And so I'm going to turn it over to you to give us the next level of your input on the correlation between the two, how first century Aramaic forgiveness can be of support to people in AA, and how to bring the message of forgiveness and living truly as human beings. I was reading through a website that had some AA quotes in it, and one in particular struck me, and I thought it was kind of a cute little quip where it said, "I tried to drown my troubles, but the little buggers learned to swim."
That was good.
that was cute. So we invite people. It is, and invite people to let go of needing to drown their troubles and forgive them instead. So what's on your mind?
What's on my mind is, of course, after I got off the phone after the program yesterday, I obsessively went through everything that I thought about and discussed and said, and saw some holes in some of the things. So I wanted to fill in some holes and some gaps.
Great.
And contribute some more of the influences that influenced the early founders to make the decisions that they made. And then if we still have time, to talk about where I see the steps in the wake-up sheet or the worksheet, and
cool.
And go from there. So
awesome.
Some of the holes.
Well, one of the things that a lot of people who have a lot of challenges in their lives do is they get stuck in this what the world calls an obsessive-compulsive disorder. And we suggest that people who have that obsessive-compulsive disorder thing going, that they make a shift, and where it can be of support for them in reviewing, rearranging, repairing something that they've done, that they turn their obsessive-compulsive disorder into an obsessive-compulsive blessing and forgive the rest. So we'll invite you to forgive any part of you that wants to make anything that you said anything other than perfect, and let's go for the next piece of the puzzle.
Okay, that works.
Cool.
What I wanted to offer is to backtrack a little bit with the conversation that Bill Wilson had with Dr. Bob Smith, and how that changed everything. When he shifted into talking about his own drinking first, to get some people to identify first with the problem, and then went on to talking about the spiritual solution. So that was one of the other things, and then the two of them went on to other people in Akron, Ohio, from that summer to the fall. And that was when the first group of Alcoholics Anonymous was formed, was in Akron. And the second group was formed in New York City, and the third group was formed in Cleveland, Ohio. And they decided that when carrying the message by word of mouth, that the message was changing, and they wanted to keep it pure. They wanted to keep the formula pure, and that they decided in 1937 to write the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The book, the fellowship, there's two Alcoholics Anonymouses. There's the book, and that was written starting in 1937 to 1939 it was published. And how they wrote the book was that they had the 40 members that were staying sober. They had Bill Wilson dictate what he wanted in the book to a lady named Ruth Hawk, and she worked for stock options. She typed out the manuscript, and when they would get so far or do a chapter, then they would send it out to the others, and then they would edit it and make comments, and then they came up with how it should be written, or a democracy on what should be in the book. It did get to the point where I've been in business meetings where alcoholics have made decisions for the group, and just trying to make a decision whether there should be a Pepsi machine or a Coke machine in a club. and that almost breaks up the group. So I can't imagine what that kind of process for writing a book would have been like. There's a lot of talk about that almost breaking up the groups, fighting over what should be in the book. So anyway, the book was finally published in 1939. There was several names for the book. They had a lot of influence with the chapter of James in the Bible. So they're thinking about calling themselves the James Group. They're thinking about calling themselves the Bill Wilson Movement. And there was a lot of names, but they did come up with Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was the first time that the fellowship takes its name from the book. And they talk about the first 100 people. By the time that the book was published, that they had 100 members that were staying sober. So they said in the preface, they talk about this book has been written by 100 people, and you can't argue with 100 people. You could argue with one person that writes a book and talks about their opinions or their experience, but you can't argue with 100 people. So that was the purpose for doing that.
And I'll bet there've been alcoholics who've been able to argue with 100 people, though.
I'm sure there is too. I'm sure there is too. A lot of women that take exception to the using God and the pronoun he has been argumented with a lot. I mean, I certainly did argue with that as well. And then I just got so beaten up that I didn't care. It's like, just tell me what to do and how to do it so I don't have to drink again. So that is. Go ahead.
One of the things you talked about yesterday, and it might help to give a definition of that, was that what empowered Bill ultimately to stay sober was a bright light spiritual experience. And in the AA tradition, is there a definition for that bright light spiritual experience?
There are two spiritual experiences that they talk about at the end of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill Wilson had that bright light spiritual experience, and he describes it as when he was in the town's hospital drying out because he feared that he was going to have DTs, and he did need to have a medical detox. That he felt like he was on a mountain, and there was this endless wind that was blowing through him. That was his spiritual experience that he had. This spiritual experience that I had, based on starting this time around in sobriety, because was around bouncing back and forth for a while, and then I finally got sober in 1999. And 6 weeks after coming back to AA, I was reading in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was reading in Bill's story. I could not relate to Bill Wilson at all because he was a man, first of all. He was very wealthy at one point in time, highly educated, came from a relatively wealthy background. He didn't have any children, and he had the perfect enabler, and I did not have an enabler. And I had children, and I didn't come from wealth. And so I finally read his book, or started to read his story. And he talks about how Ebby Thatcher was having a conversation with him in his kitchen, and he talked about how he said, you can choose your own conception of God. And then the next 5 paragraphs that are in the book happened to me. He explains about the icy intellectual mountain, which he had been in under, finally melted. He was free at last. He figured that God did want to deal with people if only we would open ourselves up to them. And I'm not paraphrasing this perfectly. And so that experience happened to me. But what they talk about at the end of the book, they do have an appendix, and it's called, I believe, the spiritual experience. And they talk about 2 varieties of a spiritual experience, because people were starting to beat themselves up because they weren't having that bright light, sudden thing happen to them. And they were calling the second spiritual experience the educational variety. And what that means, the definition of that one would be more working the steps, doing spiritual things every day to widen your human experience, and then and just waking up a little bit at a time, having a gradual change. And I've experienced both by working the steps. And I've had several bright light spiritual experiences since then, since that first one that I had. It didn't make me immune to working the rest of the steps. I did work the rest of the steps just because I had that one spiritual experience. My definition of a spiritual experience is close to the Course in Miracles, a change in perspective from love to fear. Is a miracle or a spiritual experience for me.
From fear to love?
Yeah, from fear to love, changing perception
right.
From fear to love. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah, you said from love to fear.
I'm sorry.
It's kind of bizarre, but everybody who falls into any kind of addiction does have the experience of the shift from fear, or from love to fear. We all started out the same. To me, that's one of the most hopeful aspects of one doing their work, is The truth of who we are and where we started is the same for everybody, and will always be the same, and it will always be there, and it's never touched by any experience they have in the world. And there's this conversion that takes place from love to fear, and to me, this work is about creating another conversion. And that word has been sort of usurped by religions as, I want you to join my church. But in fact, it is a conversion from a fear-based mind back to a love-based mind. That's really what all of the work is about. And the key step in doing that is to forgive, to let loose of the energy of fear long enough to let that connection to love be reestablished. And that really is what opens the door.
Agreed, and that's is something that happens in working the steps. It's also something that happens, especially looking in the inventory process. There's 4 things that are addressed in the inventory process, which is our step 4. We look at our resentment, we look at our fear, we look at our sex conduct, and we also look at harms done to others. And then we talk about them in our step 5, and 6 and 7, we start to release those. And we call them character defects and shortcomings. And the definition of a character defect and a shortcoming is based, it says in the 12 and 12, which is another piece of literature in Alcoholics Anonymous. In step 7, it talks about the root of all of our character defects is self-centered fear. And it talks about how we are afraid that we're not going to get something that we want, or that we're going to lose something that we already have. And looking at the worksheet process, that tells me that are the goals. Those are the goals that we have for other people, is that we're going to lose something that we already have, or we're not going to get something that we want. So that was the bridge for me there. But it talks about fear quite a bit, that we are a very fear-based people, and that fear builds onto our resentments, and that we use Einstein's quotes. There's 2 Einstein quotes that we use a lot, is that insanity, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And the other one is that we can't find the solution in the mind that created the problem. I'm not saying that correctly. Yeah.
And solve a problem with the mind that created it.
Yeah, exactly, and trying to figure it out. And that's, alcoholics have a tendency to be very intelligent people, very resourceful, and we think we could think our way out of it. I definitely thought that I could think my way out of it for sure, and I never could.
I know for myself that whenever I've worked with people who have a challenge with alcohol and drugs, that my experience has been that by and large they are some of the sweetest people that I've ever met. And they came in with such a tenderness. I'm always reminded of the song about Vincent van Gogh and the line that says, "And this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you." And that when that being lands and there's nowhere to be acknowledged or to really land as the gentle spiritual being that they are, that's when the pain and the trauma begin, and the rage and the fear take over, and being is lost. And
protection.
Of course, yes. And the being is lost to all of the defenses, all of the offenses, all of the pain and the trauma. And one by one, those things need to be faced. And just to reinforce for anybody that might be new, the whole goal process, part of the process with the forgiveness from first century Aramaic, is that recognizing that what drives perception, and if our perception is based in pain, it's because it's being driven by something. What always drives perception is goals. And as you say, there are 2 of the root ones are, I've got something, I'm afraid I'm going to lose it, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want. And so the goal, when it links to hostility and fear, then it creates perceptions based in hostility or fear, and that tends to lead, in my experience, to so much pain that people sooner or later have to find themselves an anesthetic. And they experience alcohol as a relief from pain rather than the toxic substance that it is. I remember working with one woman several years ago down in Florida, and she was a housewife, and her husband was a hard-working, 18-hour-a-day kind of guy, and they made a lot of money, and their routine was, he'd come home for dinner at, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they'd have 2 or 3 drinks and then a bottle of wine with dinner and 2 or 3 drinks afterward. Didn't classify themselves as alcoholics, but that was a 7-day-a-week routine. And when she started doing this work, she chose to give up alcohol. She just, made that choice, not necessarily thinking of herself as an alcoholic, but realizing that it wasn't productive or supportive for her, decided to give it up. And it had been a period of about 5 years that she hadn't touched alcohol. And she shared with me in a private session that she had gone to a party and somebody offered her a drink of hard liquor. And she said, yeah, sure, why not? And she said that the alcohol no more than touched her lips, and she experienced it as razor blades in her kidneys. That was the sensation that she had. And my offering is that the reason why people have that attraction to alcohol is because they don't experience it as razor blades in their kidneys. There's so much pain that they experience it as relief from pain. You take 2 molecules of alcohol and you take the water out, you've got ether. And people are anesthetized, so they experience being anesthetized and, without awareness of pain, go, this is good stuff. But once one starts to forgive and remove their pain, then they'll experience that as the toxic substance that it is, and the attraction will just disappear. And I've seen people, for years and years and years who don't necessarily go into a 12-step program really kick into the forgiveness process, and there comes a point where they just give up addictive substances because my take is they start to experience them as what they are rather than relief from the pain that they didn't know they had. So it's powerful when people start kicking in and the core of forgiveness canceling goals that then allows them to drop into the part of the mind that holds that kind of pain and directly bring the presence of love to that part of the mind to enhance healing. So it's powerful to watch that happen.
Agreed. One of the things that I've experienced, and by listening to speakers and being able to identify what the speakers are talking about, is alcoholics have a tendency to be very sensitive people, which is something that we're very sensitive. We just came into this world not wired, or I would say with our wires exposed more than, I'm putting in air quotes, normal people. And so the need, since we're so sensitive, that the need to anesthetize seems to be more necessary. And one of the descriptions that I heard is that alcoholics have a tendency to have like this invisible spring in their gut, and it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And they use alcohol in order to release that spring. And another example that I've heard was about feeling like you were born with ground glass on the inside of the skin, and as soon as that first drink was taken, that alcohol seemed to smooth out the glass. And the best example that I heard, and this describes me to a T, is being 30 seconds from having a screaming fit and always feeling like having to have the bells and the whistles and the mirrors and the smoke and all that going on so people wouldn't get close and really see that emptiness. And that's what I felt like. I felt like I was just on the verge of a nervous breakdown all the time. And I can remember feeling this from probably the age of 4 or 5. And always feeling like that, and knowing when I took that first drink that I found something very magic that was going to calm all that down.
Yeah, you mentioned yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to go back to it, that you remembered having your first drink at 5. Tell us more about that.
My dad had a shiny Budweiser box in the bottom of the refrigerator, and he was reaching for a beer. My dad is not an alcoholic. He is a compulsive overeater, and I would just like to say that my first drug of choice is sugar, and that's something that I very much, food is my first love. Sugar is my first love, and it's something that I went back to when you were talking about the reiterating what I said about the drunk squad of the alcoholics that were attending the group. When you're talking about cross addicting to nicotine and coffee, during meetings, as soon as alcohol and the drugs are gone, I went back to Pepsi and gained a lot of weight. And so Pepsi and sugar is definitely a struggle for me that I still deal with today. And it was a struggle down in Florida when we went to the Fresh and Raw, when they had the cans of soda behind the counter. There were several times when I wanted to sneak back there and grab one during the intensive.
Right.
But as for my first drink, my dad let me have a sip of his Budweiser, and it tasted horrible, but I remember the effect profoundly in what it did. But I didn't connect the dots to that until I got sober. And then I remember my next drink, and that was one of the things that I heard other people talk about when they talked about their first drink. Normal people don't remember the first time that they tried their parents' alcohol. And so I'm like, I must be an alcoholic if I remember this at 5, and if I remember that.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's powerful. So we're here to hold space for all of that to open and heal. Go ahead.
I guess the other things that I was going to offer about influence is the Beatitudes in Matthew 5 was something that they used before they wrote the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the key people that they turned to for that was Emmett Fox, who wrote a book called The Sermon on the Mount, where he takes the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, and he also takes the Lord's Prayer, and he breaks it down into what I would consider the Greek interpretation of those Beatitudes. And in the process of my search to find more of the divine in the 12-step program, I also read a book called The Applause of Heaven by Max Lucado, who is a Christian writer, and I was able to take the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and correlate that to the 12 steps. For me, being poor in spirit is to empty yourself out, and that speaks to me of powerlessness. To mourn, blessed be those that mourn. What that speaks to me as is my old ways don't work, and I need to mourn my old ways and do something different. And that's our step 2, is to do something different. And so I just wanted to offer that as well. They used Emmett Fox's book as well as the Oxford group, the Book of James in the Bible, the Beatitudes in the Bible, to, they used all these different pieces, and I wanted to offer those pieces as well.
Yeah, that's one of the most powerful correlations from James. Is a very simple explanation that he gives to the reason for conflict with people, and that's what's going on inside of us. And where James says, and it's kind of one of the first messages of the forgiveness work is to stop your denial, and that whenever we're in pain and we speak or think about someone else, then we have to hide the part of us that creates that pain, and that's our definition of denial. And that's one of the upfront messages for me, at least from James. He says, stop your denial. I got to start to take responsibility, and that's a big one.
Absolutely. think I filled in all the gaps for now that I felt like I needed to fill in yesterday, and
Awesome.
Drew and other influences. So I think I'm complete with that. I didn't know if you wanted to pull other people into the conversation at this point, or...
Well, let's check with Jeanie and see if there's anybody with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room to be aware of.
Nobody has their hand up, and David's in the chat room, but I don't see him on the switchboard. Dr. Tim is with us.
Okay, well, let's see what Dr. Tim has to share. What's exciting in your life, Tim?
Well, I'm sitting here with bated breath to hear what Gail has to say about the crossover and connection she's made, the ways that the 12-step process enriches what she's learned from Dr. Michael Ryce's work and the forgiveness process, and vice versa, where you see corollaries or crossovers.
Gotcha.
Great. Well, let's touch into it then.
Well, we will proceed. What I saw in the worksheet process, and there's so many different carryovers at different times, too. I will start with step one. The step one in Alcoholics Anonymous is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Then there's a nice little dash, and then it says that our lives have become unmanageable. For me, my thoughts are that it says that we're powerless, that that is about the physical. It's about the physical allergy. For me, that's 10% of the problem. And it's also the effect. That's something that we discussed at Heartland during Laws of Living, cause and effect, and that it is a physical effect due to our thinking and our lives being unmanageable. For me, that is thinking, feeling, mental, and emotional. That's 90%. And it's the only step that talks about the problem. And also the rest of the steps, when we work the rest of the steps, then our thinking changes, then our feelings change, and then we start to connect to the God of our understanding, and we don't have to drink again. And so, and that's 90%, and that is cause. And, you know, just from Abraham Hicks, the new, well, not necessarily the new, but the reemergence of the law of attraction is that we need to change cause instead of, you know, changing effects or changing effects for effects. So I see that anything that we're powerless over is always 10%, is always an effect. And anything that is unmanageable is about our thinking and feelings. And we drink over our feelings. We want to change how we feel. And since a thought comes first, and then we have feelings, we need to change our thinking, or we need to change the cause. And we're able to do that when we work the rest of the steps. How I see that correlated is, one, the steps in the worksheet process is that the problem is laid out in one. And when 1A, we put our name. 1B, we put down how we feel. But sometimes we don't know how we feel, so we look at what our thoughts are in 1D. And then we talk briefly about what happened, my story. And then the object of attention. So I'm seeing that as correlating into step one, being the only piece of material that talks about the problem and the effort to change my thoughts, or to recognize my thoughts in order to recognize how I feel, in order for those to change in the rest of the worksheet. So should I stop here to see if there's any other comments right now? Or?
Well, I'd throw in the thought that when that denial game takes over, that's when we lose contact with the part of the mind that holds pain. And of course, if we don't have contact with it, it's going to simply run rampant and leave us in that powerless place. And the behaviors, the perceptions that come out of a part of the mind that we hide from ourselves and the staying in the process of denial is what keeps us locked in that cycle, because we can't honestly face what's hidden as long as we're in that denial place. As long as I'm talking about you and how you made me mad, or you hurt me, or that upset me, or this disturbed me, then my denial keeps me separated from that part of my mind that holds my pain. And that's what I need to access to bring healing forward. And so the acknowledgement of powerlessness over what I can't give myself access to, I think, is really key. And so in step one, that's the whole process of laying out who I think it's about, what's my object of attention, acknowledging myself as the truth of who I am as love, and then what are my thoughts, what are my feelings, what's the situation, really gives us an opening to start to look at the part that's powerless by simply admitting and acknowledging it. And so to me, that's kind of how step one correlates in that regard, and to recognize that, this body-mind unit, the carbon-based memory system, has a purpose, and that's to make real who we are, to embody as love, and that can't happen very well if it's filled with all kinds of dissociated content that's unresolvable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I read down further, and I looked at the I want to punish by, and I as an alcoholic, for me, I appreciate this part so much, because I think that because somebody is not doing it my way, that I have the right to punish. And one of the things that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is, I heard a lot of old timers say, don't drink, don't drug, don't hit. And I'm like, what? Why? Why would you say that? And then it was explained, and everybody giggles, don't drink, don't drug, don't hit. Damn. And it was explained that in order to punish somebody else or to have a confrontation, I would need to drink in order to loosen those inhibitions up. Or after I had a conversation or got into a fight with somebody else, then I would feel so much guilt, shame, and remorse that I'd need to drink. So then I was able to understand why old-timers would say that in meetings. And so examining how I'd want to punish somebody, because I think I have the right when somebody doesn't do it my way to punish somebody else. And that's not right.
And of course, there's the tie to punish self as well, and there's the tie to the codependence issue, because that's a power person dynamic. Everybody who, in order to control what's going on in their lives, has to lash out at someone, whether they hit or verbally abuse or put down or whatever, is because they had a power person who did that, and they're just replicating that power person behavior. And the ability to access that dynamic and start to see where, and to expose the hidden parts of the mind to love, when in that power person dynamic, becomes a very empowering process.
Understood. And then the bubble, where we release, I release and surrender myself, my feelings, 1C, my story and my thoughts and my punishment, to love. I love how that is reiterated and recapped. And then I also, I do a little ceremony there where I'm releasing that in a visualization, releasing all that. And then I cancel my need to be right and to make up another story. Definitely looking at this is a story, and that I could very easily have another story replace the story that I'm releasing. And that's something that we take care of in the inventory process as well. I really appreciate when you say, 42 people 87 times, that it's inside of me when I'm writing down in the inventory process who I have resentments against, because I might be writing down different names, but I'm basically writing down very similar situations that happen next, and it offers an opportunity to see how I'm manifesting the same story over and over again, just with different people.
Yeah, the tie, in the fourth step with made that searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Each worksheet is, in fact, an inventory.
Yes, agreed.
Even if I have one event and I do 5 worksheets around that particular event in a day, I'm inventorying the hidden parts of my mind and allowing myself to allow that to come back to awareness and the dynamics of that. So that's really key. And in effect, in doing worksheets, it's an ongoing daily inventory. It's a fourth step. Virtually every day. And David has his hand up with a comment for us. David, how are you, sir?
Can you hear me okay?
You're loud and clear. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Miss Gail, for passing on all your experience, strength, and hope. It's wonderful. It's a good day today to be part of the solution. I said a lot of good things, and you were just saying that, the management worksheet was like a fourth step. And, my personal experience, those sides, it's the management worksheet is all 12 steps. It's basically living in 10, 11, and 12, which we're doing a personal inventory, and we're trying to find that power greater than ourselves through prayer and meditation, and then trying to help others or trying to practice these principles in all our affairs. In our book, the big book, which is the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the preface it talks about that the book is the basic text, and it really saved my life, getting in and getting a sponsor and getting somebody to help show me the truth about myself, because I've been living in denial, living a lie. You talk about Pepsi, and food. It's peanut butter and Long John donuts for me. But it's still corrupt data. That's the great thing is it is corrupt data. And even though I lived in the program and practiced the program for a long time, it's still the basic text. It doesn't mean it's the only text. We can go elsewhere to increase our spiritual path or our spiritualness, which is love and forgiveness. But he also mentions, I think, Gail, about the first step, we're powerless over our addiction, and it says in NA. AA, it says powerless over alcohol, dash, that our lives are unmanageable. That dash means that there's a second thought coming. Not something that pertains to the person, but there's an absolute different thought coming. And the addiction is only mentioned in the first half of the first step. The remaining 11 and a half steps deal with my life becoming manageable.
Agreed. Thank you.
And
right.
You said it.
Right.
You said it. And that's what it is. And my problem, including my alcoholism, was my inability to have a relationship with another human being. I didn't know that at the time. I had a great relationship with the thoughts in my own head, but those were poison. And it led me around, and it made my life totally unmanageable. My mind was controlling me instead of me controlling my mind. And this is where the forgiveness worksheets helps me along this path, plus all the other seminars that goes into the profiling of that worksheet too. The power person, and are you getting the stress you need, and responsible communication, and mind shifting, and on and on and on. But and you mentioned that one quote and about doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is a form of insanity. And my mind goes to the left-hand column of the things that I've done that I'm ashamed of, and the right-hand column, which is all about the newborn, which is all about love. And when I'm in the right-hand column about all the negative stuff, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it is insanity. But when I am just trying to get over in that human being side, that loving side, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, becomes progress, not perfection. And that's using the same words, but now the motives are different, my insides are different. It's away from my head and into my heart, and that's just a beautiful thing, to discover that.
Powerful.
The other thing, right. The other thing that you mentioned was about our emotions, and one of the big tools I picked up from Dr. Ryce and except there, that drawbridge, confusing the trigger with the mechanism. I always blame the trigger. And that relieves me of my responsibility. As long as I could blame you, then I was free. And then they tell me that as long as I'm blaming somebody else, I'm codependent. Well, truth is, isn't right. This doesn't make any sense at all. But that's what it all is. And it's on YouTube now, but there's a Father Martin Choctaw who talks about the first thing that goes when we take a drink or something in our comfort zone. The first thing that goes is my intellect, and what comes to the top is my emotions. So my first line of defense is gone, and now I'm relying on my emotions. If it feels good, I got to do it. It's got to be right. And throughout the years of my addiction, as my addiction gets worse, I'm doing everything on my feelings. And so he talked about it, Chalk talked about you've got emotion, you've got intellect over emotions, and that makes my life manageable. But as soon as I take a drink or a drug, the intellect goes away, the emotions come to the top, and now I've got emotion over intellect. Then down the road, I quit drinking and drugging, and I'm still sensitive. Why am I still sensitive? Because the emotions I'm using are the emotions I learned while in that addictive slide. While I was high or inebriated. And the winds got real closer together at the end, so I was always looking for something to make me feel better. And I discovered through the program and through Dr. Ryce's work that everything that makes me feel good when I'm in an alcoholic mind is temporary. It's not going to last. I'm going to be looking for it again in 5 minutes or an hour. The big book talks about you can't remember the humiliation of a week ago or a month ago. Well, that'd be pretty nice because I can not remember the humiliation of this morning. So those are some things that I was thinking about when you were talking. And in fact, in the talks, that was required reading from one of the co-founders of AA, Dr. Bob, and it was me too. And that's another wonderful thing. Emma Fox used to give these lectures in New York right down the street from where they had the AA meetings at Calvary Chapel. So after the drug squad got through, a lot of them go down. Liz and I, Emma Fox, and one of the guys that was an alcoholic supposedly. His mother was one of the secretaries of Emma Fox. So we just don't know how this is going to unfold. But so anyway, I was listening, and it was all great. I think that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, and one of the points you made there, Dave, was the one about how when I blame somebody else, I alleviate myself of responsibility, and I certainly seem to alleviate myself of responsibility. And then what I have left is all that pain, which, as long as I'm blaming somebody else, is unresolvable, and that's what makes my life unmanageable. So it's just an interesting circle. So I appreciate the way you brought that around.
Yeah, and we talked about, the feel is real, but the why is a lie. And when I started out on that, I got that from you, that's cool. When I started out on a worksheet, my intention is to criticize and punish. And along through the way of that worksheet, I get to the point to where I really have to look at myself and know it's screw up data. And then I got a choice to make. Do I want to be serene and happy and joyful? And now what do I do next? Well, I got to connect with a power greater than myself. And choose a goal for that, the person I'm mad at to do. And as soon as I choose it, I have to cancel it. And then I go to my higher power and let them interject love back into it. So we can, and by the time it gets over, my punishing line at first now is in love, and you talk about that nicely when we talk about Lakma and Kuba, and once both filters are set to love, that's absolute love, and one way to go. Not there yet. That's why I got to keep coming back.
It is a process, a lifetime of work. Yes, the habit of alcohol is not created in a day. I think it's a multi-generational process, and so of course it's not undone in a day. But the truth is that people, if they choose to pick up the tools, and again, especially with the holidays coming up and the free flow in many cases of alcohol and hostility and rage and guilt and old family dynamics, that one who chooses to use the tools can still participate in those family events and be in a centered, connected, loving space rather than impacted by the things around them through the things they've hidden from themselves. So the ownership of those parts of the mind are such a big key, and that to me is one of the reasons why the inventory aspect of the worksheet is so powerful, that one can own and see, as they talk about in the fifth step, exactly where their error lies, that instead of living in blockage of truth, they can live in love of truth. And when I live in love of truth, instead of, look what you did to me, I can step into, my mind's telling me the lie, the feel is the real, the why is the lie. My mind's telling me the lie that this is yours, and at this point I can then really own the part of my mind that I've dissociated from. And that becomes the admission of the exact nature of my error. And loving truth, I can start to bring that error to truth. And in that is its dissolution. One of the things Course in Miracles talks about is bringing the world you do not want to the one that you do. And that's holding to that connection to love, that connection to a higher power, or as AA speaks of it, God as you know him to be. And that when we hold fast to that energy and maintain that, then we can bring everything that's based in error forward. And as that happens, that which is based in error, when it's based in truth, or the source of truth, dissolves, disappears. And so it's a big key. I mean, the insight of being able to admit and to own the nature of the error is really a powerful piece in the puzzle.
Right. I'm gonna let you go and finish off the next 5 minutes. So I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. We appreciate you. Blessings. Dr. Tim, any thoughts?
Just dittos. It's very, very nice to see although it's been difficult to hear the quality of the call sometimes, I'm following it. I'm hoping other people can. It's very nice to see that people are looking for similarities and overlaps between very strong, powerful systems that have helped many, many people. And I love this kind of discussion as opposed to, well, my system is right because of this and your system is wrong because of that. I love the integrative factor of this call. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's powerful that, the beauty that there are so many places that truth is coming forward in the world, that we can be fed by all of them is pretty awesome. So, Gail, we're down to about 3 minutes. Any closing thoughts for today?
I appreciated everything Dave had to say, and he filled in a lot of the gaps of things that I thought, but it just didn't come out of my mouth. So I just appreciate the way he reiterated it and made it his own and presented it and offered it, and that was awesome. It went very well, and it made me rethink some things too, and connect some more dots with the forgiveness process as well. And I agree with you that this is an inventory as well as all the steps. And I used to call the worksheets inventories for the longest time because I couldn't say worksheet. I'm like, I'm going to do another inventory. So yeah, agreed there too. And step 10 is do an inventory every day as well. So that is a part of that too. And I just wanted to recap by saying that. And I guess tomorrow we will continue to go down the sheet.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, we appreciate you, and thank you for your willingness to be of support. Hey, Dr. Tim, we are down to the last minute or so we'll close the show out and just say that if you have a thought for us tomorrow, it'd be awesome if you put your hand up early in the show and give us your thoughts, your input, and if there's any way that we can support you, that's what we're here to do. In the meantime, if you're ready to take your work to the next level, February 1st, we'll begin a 9-day codependence to interdependence communication practicum. That 9-day will then turn into a 16-day for those who want to extend that workshop out. So there'll be a 9-day segment that will extend if people want to stay longer. And then we've got a 16-day Laws of Living plan. So if you want to take your work to the next level in a very deep experiential way, people who are really about doing their work, it's a powerful space to work in. And we happen to have this beautiful 3,500 square foot, very nicely appointed house, so it'll be kind of in the lap of luxury that we'll be doing this intensive. And if you want to join us, then contact Jeanie or I through the website, and we'll look forward to having the conversation. Otherwise, bring a stranger to the show tomorrow and create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye. Show tomorrow and create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift.